Hello and welcome to College of Idaho Insights. I'm Dustin Wunderlich, and today I'm joined by Professors Carrie Hunter and Jasper LaCalsby from the Department of Political Economy and Professor Steve Mon from the Department of History. Today we'll be discussing the value of liberal arts in the 21st century. Steve, there recently was a study of employers that came out talking about the skills that they're looking for in the 21st century and a little bit of a mismatch in what they're actually finding in graduates. What did you find most interesting about that survey?
Yeah, this was a survey that was done by Millennium Branding recently with 225 national employers. The story is actually posted for anybody who'd like to look at it, right, presumably, along with our talk today, but also on the History Department Facebook page at the College of Idaho. My colleague Mia Kim actually posted that. And what the study revealed was that employers, when they're asked what they're looking for in terms of new employees, the top category was actually engineers and computer science people at 34% of the employers. But the surprise second place at 30% was liberal arts graduates, liberal arts majors. And the reasoning behind this was the critical importance of communication skills, of the ability to write, of the ability to think analytically and synthesize complex data into analytics for whatever job they're finding themselves in. Also, employers prize very highly the ability to work in teams, the ability to get along with others, the ability to communicate. And liberal arts graduates often have to, in many of their classes, engage in discussions, debates, collaborative learning, teamwork, and work closely with other individuals, even in adversarial situations. And I think all of that package, taken together, creates the kind of skills that are developed, as the survey suggests, rather than skills that can be acquired or learned very easily, hard skills that employers can teach and train their employees to. But this set of skills is one that is a developing set, and if you get employees who come in with those skills, you are miles ahead in terms of being able to develop them further, whether it's with hard skills or whether it's with leadership positions.
So in a sense, the article saying communication skills are what's priority.
But not communication majors, interestingly enough.
Sure.
And why is that?
But communications, I mean, this is something that I mean, we are a democratic capitalist society, and Plato could have predicted that indeed communication skills would be a high priority in our society. Why? Because everything's up for grabs. So if you can shuck and jive, communicate, make your point, somehow you're a value to your employer.
Right. No, I think that has a lot to do with it, and the reality is that when you get people who are focused on specific hard skills, for example, when they were asked, accounting and finance degree holders, I mean, they're down 18–19%, they say they're looking for, significantly below liberal arts majors. And that was actually quite a surprise, but simply because you have the technical skills to manipulate, right, a balance sheet, to do the technical things. I mean, Jasper knows all about this, having himself been in that field with Arthur Andersen for years. Those aren't necessarily transferable outside of that specific set of tasks that can be assigned to you. And so your versatility, your flexibility as an employee is not there. It's a very rigid set of circumscribed skills.
You calling Jasper a rigid guy?
Well, he was before he went on to get a degree.
What's interesting is when I did get hired by Arthur Andersen, the first thing they do is they send you away for 2 weeks at a training center, at least they used to before they went out of business. And what they did was they bought a small liberal arts college, kind of like, I mean, it's not much different from our place here, that had gone out of business. And you had 2 weeks of FAST, it was called, F-A-S-T, that was to teach you how you do things their way. And what's interesting is they didn't teach you necessarily accounting and stuff, as much as anything was how do you interview people. Because much of what you had to do as an auditor was to go into a business, people you don't know, and get them to open up and tell you stuff. And the better you were at talking to people, making them feel comfortable, the better you were. So that's why some of the people who I knew who were technically the best in accounting knew all the different standards and how to do everything, weren't the best auditors because they couldn't get the information that they needed. Because basically what you wanted to do was to go into the client, get them to tell you what you needed to know, and really get them to do your work for you, because then that would be less for you to do. And that's what they really stressed with people who were able to communicate. And also writing was very important too, because everything I did, you have to write down and communicate to somebody. This is what I did, these are the results I had to the partner, whoever was the boss. So communication skills, if you're accounting, whatever you are, that's really what's most important.
One of the other things that the study indicated was the importance of internships, that employers say that they want students with 1 or 2 or 3 internships, and in fact this is something they expect. Something like 80–90% of the employers were saying this, but it also indicated that 50% of the employers said that they hadn't actually hired any interns into their businesses in the last 6 months. So they want something, they want that on-the-job training, but they're not necessarily willing to provide the opportunities. And I think one of the things that happens at liberal arts schools is you see faculty mentors and you see career centers placing a lot more emphasis on and placing a lot more resources at the command of students who are looking to get into internships. I think there's a much higher percentage of students who do internships, and I think it's one of the reasons why they come out on the job market with a profile that's far less frightening. Because often I think employers will sit across the table from a prospective employee and they'll wonder, is this person crazy? Is this person lazy? Is this person, right, sort of ultimately going to work well, play well with others? And one of the things that internships demonstrate, and one of the things that the intimate education that students get at liberal arts colleges indicates, is the ability to play well with others. So, I mean, this is one of the things that, you know, I know your department, my department, we encourage students to get into these internship situations because they learn about themselves, they learn what their skills are, but they also demonstrate to prospective employers, you know, I can successfully exist and contribute in a working environment.
And we keep hearing from the employers who take up our interns that they're amazed at how well our students write, which again is suggesting this liberal arts education, developing communication skills, is something that's not happening elsewhere to the degree that they would like to see, because our students really do stand out. We're often amazed at how some of our students stand out.
Who aren't necessarily
stand out.
Right, exactly.
Who
when they were here, we thought, wow, great kid, nice, but not, you know, sort of by a long chalk the best student that we've seen in our classes, but they go out and they do incredibly well.
Well, but I think that's
grow.
Well, I think that's some of it, and I think some of it too is the skills to be an outstanding student aren't necessarily transferable. So some of the kids, and I know I've done this too, I said, wow, how come you didn't hire this person or take this person on an internship, this or that? And, wow, they're so great in the classroom, but that's not what they're really looking for. I think another thing with internships, or even more casual, what I push with in our department too is students to go out, this year's an election year, go out and volunteer with some campaign. Work with a campaign, do stuff. Because what I found since being in Idaho is how close-knit this community is, that no one's going to hire anybody unless they either know that person or someone will recommend that and knows that person. And so you really have to get out there and get to know people. That they don't want to hire anyone they don't know. That it's a cold resume comes in, they're not going to hire them. But they'll see, and I've known this happen, well, I got this resume from someone, and they had this person as a reference. I called them, and then it's okay. And then the best references I've seen, they tell, is our own graduates want students from here and call us up and say, I got this resume from so and so. What are they like? And it's. And I'd like to tell our students that.
Well, this is another thing that the survey indicated, was that employers value certain things above others. One of the things that they value are, in fact, detailed and positive letters of recommendation and references from previous employers or from professors. And I think one of the things that we do here, at least I do, and I'm pretty sure you guys do as well, is I think we write strong, detailed letters of recommendation for our students. Because if you get a form letter that says so-and-so is a good student, they always came to class, sort of you should hire them, and it's, a paragraph long, not very impressive. But I think a good letter for a student that you know well often takes, an hour, 2 hours, sometimes longer to craft. And often they're relatively long because you know a lot about them. That carries a lot of weight, I think, with potential employers. And it's frankly something that students at larger institutions just can't get because they just never actually get to know their professors.
And that makes you wonder, again, I haven't done the study, read the study closely. I mean, I read the article, but you don't know, I mean, it may be those sorts of reasons why liberal arts students are getting hired because of, I mean, maybe they're getting better letters of recommendation, detailed personal letters of recommendation. And that's one of the things I try to tell students when they come here is what they're doing in trying to get a degree at a place like this is building cultural capital. They need to plug in, or they're plugging into a group of professors who have already gotten that capital. When we say somebody is of value to our society, we're listened to. And so one of the things that they need to be doing is developing that relationship with us so that we can write those letters, because I'm guessing those letters are more important than their grades when they go out on the job market.
Right.
Well, because I think they add kind of meat to the bones to a grade. It's one thing, an employer can look and say, oh, well, they got an A in this course. But then I can write in there, this is what we do in this course, and here's one of the assignments we do, and this is what the assignment is, and this is why Dustin did so well, not that he wouldn't, but this is why a student did so well in this assignment, and I can emphasize certain things, especially about, the student will send me, whether it's for an internship or for the job, here's the description, here's what they're looking for, so I can go back and say, oh, okay, I remember they did this assignment and that showed this, or it's so easy, I think, for us to write letters of recommendation here. If they're a major in our department, we've had them at a minimum 2, probably 3, 4 classes. There's so much we can draw from for examples that are credible.
Well, and this study reminds me of a study that I read about some years ago, and this was a study that went back and interviewed physicians, doctors at the ends of their careers, interviewed mid-career physicians, and interviewed students who were just out of med school in their internships, and they asked them about their undergraduate experience, what they wish they would have had more of. And at the intern stage, students are saying, I wish I would have had more biology, more science classes, that would have helped me through med school, it would help me in this situation. Mid-career, they said, I wish that I would have had accounting, business. I would have had the kinds of
from lawyers,
right, the kinds of. But when you get to the end of career, or sort of 60, 65 years old, people who are at the top of HMOs, they say, I wish I would have taken philosophy class, more philosophy classes, more history classes, more political economy classes, because they give you insight into people, into human systems. That's what I'm having to deal with now. And I think what a liberal arts education does is it gives students that kind of insight and those kinds of tools at the beginning of their career. And I think that's a kind of capital, a kind of knowledge capital that is often significantly underappreciated by those who imagine, what a job market is and what it wants. It wants people with skills, right? Nursing skills or engineering skills or whatever. And at an entry level, that is often the case. But those are not the kinds of skills that are going to take you to the top of your company or the top of your profession. You need something in addition to those skills. And I think that's what the liberal arts background gives to students.
Well, one of our requirements for our health science classes is my introduction to public policy. I get as many health science students in there now as political economy students. And they kind of come in and, what am I taking this for? I want to know, where's my other biology, chemistry class? And what I try to get across to them, and I think it hopefully does, if not then, eventually, if you're going to be in the healthcare field now, it's more about public policy than it is about biology and medicine anymore. How you, what you're going to have to do, what your profession is like is being shaped by both the policy in Washington, but also on the state level. You're going to have to deal with Medicaid. You have to deal with Medicare. You're going to have to deal with people with insurance, and how you have to deal with insurance and that's one of the biggest parts of healthcare now, and they don't get it when they first get here, and they don't in my class, and they don't necessarily like doing a debate in class, so they get over that eventually too.
It's also good for them.
Yeah.
One of the things in the survey that they talked about was the importance of entrepreneurial attitudes. Is there something about the liberal arts that you think helps students develop sort of an entrepreneurial spirit?
Yeah, well, when they spoke about entrepreneurial attitudes, it's interesting because they mentioned that it wasn't necessarily, entrepreneurial attitudes are not necessarily about having or starting or running a business.
Right.
Entrepreneurial attitudes have to do with a sense of self-reliance and the ability to, on your own initiative, and with your own ideas and your own motivation, to move a project forward of some sort. That is something, again, that I think our students tend to get because they have to write independent research papers. It is extraordinary. I've spoken with some of our recent graduates who've gone to law school, and they will talk about some of the people in their classes with them, and they'll say when they graduate from X university, they never once wrote a paper.
Right.
In university. I mean, this is what used to be appalling with students who came out of high schools. Right now, it's almost never do you have students, unless they come out of an IB program or some a special high school of some sort or another. And now it's becoming true of universities. Well, if you haven't had to write a paper, if you haven't had to organize your thoughts, if you haven't had to take a diversity of material and shape it into an argument in a logical fashion, and you're asked to do a project that asks you to do exactly those kinds of things when you're in an employment situation, you're at a loss. So I do think that
And we've seen
students
that.
have that.
We get the comments from law
Kids
schools
going
about
to
that
law
with,
school, right.
with writing. I mean, they'll look at their first assignments, a 5-page paper that they have to write. Our students are going, okay, no big deal. Now, their colleagues are, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? They're there.
No,
like,
my daughter went to the Japanese Center for Michigan Universities in Japan a year ago, and she said it was amazing. They took courses at a university there in history and other subjects, and they were asked to write a 5-page paper, which she laughed at him. She's a student. She was a student at this school and was used to write. But all of these kids.
She wrote a 5-page paper for me the first semester.
Right. All of these kids who are were coming from Michigan universities were just totally flabbergasted at how much work they were going to. I mean, how can I possibly write 5 pages? So again, I think a liberal arts college emphasis on writing is. I mean, that's the norm. I mean, kids are doing this.
Well, and we don't
right
think of.
from
I
the
mean,
start.
I think there's this tendency for people out in the so-called real world to say, well, all that book work, all of that, so that's not real
Book
world
learning.
work. That book learning, that's not real world work, right? Sort of, that's not what entrepreneurs do. Well, the reality is that it's precisely what entrepreneurs in complex, in sort of management and business situations are asked to do every day when they take on projects, when they become team leaders, when they sort of are asked to undertake the rollout of a new product.
Organize a lot of ideas.
Exactly.
well,
And-
that's what Curry and I teach the first year seminar class, and some of the students think when they go, well, this is a writing class. No, it's a thinking class. The writing is just how you're communicating your thinking.
Right.
And I try to tell, well, if you have issues with the mechanics, the style of your writing, we can work on that. That you can fix easy enough. If you can't think, and I don't care how beautiful the prose is, there's nothing there. And that's what we work on more with the writing is making an argument. That's
well, and what's most frustrating to students who come in from high school and they are good writers in terms of having good grammar, good mechanics, and they get back that first paper and it's a C, and they say, well, I got A's all the time. Well, where's your thesis? Where's the support? Where are your topic sentences? How does this fit together? Your idea ultimately isn't
Where's
tenable,
your idea?
even though
Where's
you
your
wrote,
idea?
right? You wrote these beautiful sentences, but ultimately they're empty. Again, I think liberal arts graduates understand that writing alone, eventually, most of them
That's what
understand.
Yeah, that's what they're developing.
Right.
Because most people talk with relatively decent grammar. It's not as if they don't know how to express themselves correctly. They just don't know how to do it in writing. And so, what I've discovered is if you can help them have something to say, the grammar seems to flow naturally.
Right.
Because it's just having something to say about a topic and feeling a need to express your something, that brings out good writing. And that's the challenge, is to get them to feel empowered to actually say something.
Well, yeah, right. And you say, you know, to have something to say. It's not have anything to say,
right.
but to have something substantive to say is different, because, well, I wrote about this, but you didn't say anything. Where's your point? And well, I did make a point here, but that's not very relevant.
Not very interesting.
And it's not interesting.
And it's not interesting.
Yeah.
That's what I try to tell them, I want you to write me, I have to read all these. Don't make it hard for me. Make me interested in this.
Right,
And
you've got to sell your topic.
That becomes something that's very, employers ought to want.
If you can sell an idea in a paper,
Right.
you're well on your way to selling other things as well. And again, I think a lot of students don't think about writing in that way. And it's not least because more and more in our high schools, students are being taught to write short expository essays or personal essays that are designed specifically to demonstrate certain kind of grammatical skills.
Right.
But they're not asked to create a systematic argument with the buttressing points of evidence and effective argumentation. And so a lot of our students come in here being reasonably decent writers, but they're not, as Jasper says, organized and disciplined thinkers yet. And I think
it's a thinking. That's what we teach in the first year seminar, is how to think. Not, there's some how to write, but it's how to think. It's so mushy. That's the way we describe it. It's mushy. You've got to have some strength in there. I can just push this aside. It doesn't do anything.
But there are other indicators. Again, I think medical school is a really interesting case of this, and I think anybody who advises students who are pre-med or pre-health at this point is beginning to recognize how important the American medical schools are beginning to consider social sciences, the humanities as backgrounds for physicians. And I think the recent new MCAT guides listed psychology, for example, as one of the essential fields that students should understand. Now, the problem is that I think a lot of students are going to look at that and say, well, I need to have biology and psychology, when really what they should probably have is biology and religion, or biology and English. Because, again, the studies, this is about 10 years ago, students who apply to medical school, the highest admission rates come from those with philosophy majors, followed by English majors, followed by history majors, right? The lowest is biology at 56% acceptance. Now, of course, that's a much bigger, it's a much bigger pool, because not many people say, well, I'm going to major in philosophy and I'm going to study for the MCAT. But those students who do that have a much higher acceptance rate, because medical schools are recognizing one of the most important skills that doctors should have are human skills, that they're not simply wetware mechanics, right? Sort of working on the tissue systems. Well, that it's working with people and understanding people and being able to motivate and communicate with people that makes an excellent doctor.
And I'll plug our new curriculum, because that's what I'm supposed to do, huh? But I believe in it, though. It's not, I'm going to be a biology major and take a religion class.
Right.
I'm going to be a biology major and take a history class. I don't think to do it. With our P curriculum, where you have to do a whole minor, where you're doing 5 classes in that area, then you got a little, not more than a little taste, you're really literate in that area. It makes you have a new way of thinking, which I think is really important.
Yeah. So you have the breadth, but you have depth in those areas as well. It's not just a survey. It's not just a checklist of getting rid of.
So you're not just a philosophy major going to med school. You can be still that biology major with that background, but still with the philosophy and psychology.
Well, and I was recently reading about Stanford University and questions about Stanford's. Stanford, that's
they're in California, aren't they?
Little school in California. Little school. And Stanford's philosophy with regard to student education is what they call the T model. That is, that students should have a solid foundation in a major. That's the T. I'm sorry, the leg of the T. But at the top, right, so that which crosses the top is actual real depth in other fields outside of their major. So Stanford, I mean, they obviously don't have a peak curriculum, they go about it in a different way, poor Stanford, right? But their philosophy is actually very similar to the underlying philosophy of the peak program, which is it's not simply enough to allow somebody to specialize in a single discipline and then just take a smattering of courses that expose them in a superficial way to other disciplines and ways of thinking. It's important to have real depth and real substance in those other areas as well. And you know, again, I think this makes for a much better educational model. Also, because our students have the chance to mix and match and choose the programs that they're going to put together, they're able to personalize a program that I think, you know, is going to be turning out even stronger graduates from this college in the next few years.
One of the things I find interesting talking to our alums, people who graduate with a political economy major, seem to go into so many different fields, and that, to me, that's evidence of the strength of this of the findings in this article. Political economists are doing all kinds of things
in all kinds of places too. The number of our recent graduates who aren't in this country, I mean, I think there may be more who are out of the country than in the country, especially our international political economy major.
Which is part of that entrepreneurial spirit we're talking. These are people who feel empowered to go out and do anything, anywhere. And
well, I think what's interesting is both our colleagues, Jeff Snyder in history and Rob Daly in political economy, are taking students in China right now, and they're going to have an alumni event in Beijing, because there's so many of our alumni who are in Beijing right now that it'll be quite large as compared to, you know, as well attended as probably some of our alumni events in some other places, because we have so many of our recent graduates who are living and working in China now.
Well, thank you everybody for participating in today's discussion, and thank you to all of our viewers. Have a good day.